So a little while back, I spent a few weeks cycle touring in Greece, island hopping from one of the easternmost islands over to Athens on the mainland before riding over to the west of the country. So in this video, I just wanted to share some of the things that I learned while cycle touring in Greece. So one of the cool things about cycle touring in Greece is that there is this amazing network of ferries that you can use to get between the islands. And with most of the ferries, there's no additional cost for bringing your bike. You just leave your bike with the cars and that's it. However, it's worth bearing in mind that bikes can't be taken on all of the ferries, at least not without partially dismantling them, which is especially true of the smaller and faster ferries. I came across a really useful page on a website, which I'll link to down below, that keeps an up-to-date list of which ferries do and do not allow bikes, and that describes the conditions for taking them on. I mostly use the website Ferry Scanner for booking my tickets, which enables you to just download the tickets to your phone. Of course, the prices for the ferries reflect the length of the crossing. The cheapest ferry that I got was between the islands of Egistri and Aina, which took about 20 minutes and cost me about €6. On the other hand, the most expensive ferry that I took was between the islands of Kos and Samos, which took about 4.5 hours and cost me about €57. I took around 8 ferries while island hopping from Rhodes to the mainland and paid approximately €28 on average. As well as getting you from A to B, the ferries give you a good excuse to take a break, maybe eat a cheese pie in a cafe, and take in some of the views of the sea and the islands. One of my favourite parts of cycle touring in Greece was all of the amazing wild camping spots. As an experiment, I decided not to bring a tent with me, as I slept on a hammock or just on a thin inflatable mattress most nights. Some of my most memorable spots were a cliff overlooking a beautiful bay on the island of Rhodes, an abandoned stone shepherd's hut on the top of a hill on Mykonos, and a remote beach dotted with pine trees on the Corinthian Gulf. Although I didn't have a tent, I did stay at one campsite where I created a tent-like structure by turning my bike upside down and then putting a tarp over the top of it. I paid about €12, which based on a quick search is probably towards the cheaper end of the scale, so you might need to pay a little bit more in some places. As I was working during the trip, I also stayed in a few hotels. Of course, I tried to find cheap rooms, but I was happy to pay a little bit more if the place looked nice and if it had good reviews and a good internet connection. So the least I paid was about €35 for a room on Egistri with a rating of 8.6 on booking.com, whereas the most I paid was about €60 for a room on Syros with a rating of 9.4. On average, I paid about €50 per night. So if you ever need a break from camping while cycle touring in Greece, you can find some great hotel rooms that hopefully won't set you back too much. So one of the reasons I was able to find affordable hotel rooms is that I was there in May, so just before the peak tourist season, which runs from about mid-June to early September. Another benefit of going just before or after summer is the weather, which for me was neither too hot nor too cold. As an example, on the island of Rhodes in May, the average highs are about 24 degrees. The average lows at night are about 18 degrees, and the average sea temperature is about 20 degrees. You also get around 11 hours of sunshine each day, and there's only a couple of rainy days throughout the entire month. On the other hand, if you were to go in August, you'd be looking at highs during the day of 31 degrees, with temperatures only dropping to 25 degrees at night. In contrast, if you went in January, you could expect highs of 15 and lows of 11, which isn't too bad if you've got the right clothes and the right camping gear, but you would also have to contend with rain on about 1 out of every 3 days. So for me, and this is true of most countries on the Mediterranean, the best times to go would probably be late May or late September, when the air and sea temperatures are still comfortable and when you can get some better rates for accommodation, whether that's a pitch in a campsite or a room in a hotel. One small point that's worth mentioning is that it's quite common to find gas canisters for camping stoves in supermarkets and even in small grocery stores throughout Greece. I guess this is because it's quite common for locals to cook or make coffee outside on portable stoves when they're camping or at the beach. When I was there, this meant that I was never really too worried about running out of gas, and so I often stopped to cook something, whether some scrambled eggs and feta on a beach at lunchtime, or spaghetti and pasta sauce in whatever strange place I had found to spend the night. When people talk about holidays in Greece, they often mention the islands, but actually one of my favorite sections of my trip was on the mainland, specifically on the north coast of the region of Peloponnese. Some parts were really like a cycle touring paradise with smooth, quiet coastal roads lined by wildflowers, overlooked by rocky mountains and with views down to these untouched coves. There were also winding climbs and descents through forests with that great smell of pine, and beautiful sunrises on empty beaches with only the sounds of small waves lapping at the coast or little fishing boats heading out to sea. So even though there's something special about being on a small island, it's worth remembering that the Greek mainland, even outside of cities like Athens, has so much to offer. So those are some of the things I learned while cycle touring in Greece. If you've been there too, I'd love to hear about your experiences. If you're considering going, feel free to get in touch with any questions you might have. And if you do go, I hope that you have an amazing time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.